Hello everyone, how are you? Welcome back. In the previous video, we start a new chapter. It is about limit, and we have seen one videos. And now this video is proceeding from the first video. It's about uh, least upper bound and greatest lower bound. We have seen those in examples on the first video about sequence. Now we will see them in detail. So be with me. Okay, let us start. Definition: let a and be a sequence of numbers, so x is stated to be the least upper bound, which means least upper bound, that is the minimum value or the least value from the upper bound of the sequence an of an. If x is an upper bound of an and whenever y is an upper bound of an, then x less than or equals to y, which means x is the minimum value of the upper bound of the sequence an. Okay, x is called the greatest lower bound, which means the greatest value of the sequence an, which means if x is a lower bound of an and whenever y is a lower bound of an, then x greater than or equals to y, which is x is the greatest lower bound, because sequences may be with an upper bound or lower bound. Upper bound or lower bound means the value, which means the sequence an is bounded between those two values, the lower bound and upper bounds. We know the greatest lower bound and the least upper bound because we have a lot of upper bounds and lot of lower bounds. We only know the two boundaries, the least upper bound and the greatest lower bound. So first of all, don't forget to subscribe. Please press the subscribe button if you don't subscribe to the channel. Okay, now you may determine the LUB, which means lowest upper bound or greatest lower bound of a sequence using different techniques of describe a sequence, such as listing the first few terms or plotting points. So we have two ways to list the greatest lower bound and least upper bounds: by first listing a few first numbers or plotting in a graph. So example, find the LEB and GLB of each of the following sequences. This sequence is when we n, maybe if n is the natural number which starts from 1 up to any number, this sequence is between 1, 0 less than or equals to 1 over n less than or equals to what? 1, because when we take a large number in value of n, it will approaches to 0, and when we take 1, it is equals to 1. So the first few terms are, when we take 1, it will be 1. When we take 2, 1 over 2, 1 over 3, 1 over 1 over 5. It is, yes, it's going to 0. So decreases to 0. Least upper bound is 1 and greatest lower bound is 0, because upper bound means the values which is greater than from 1, greater than or equals to 1, and the lower bound is the values which is less than or equals to 0, which means the values which is less than or equals to 0, the greatest is 0, and the value which is less than which is greater than or equals to 0 is the lowest, the least upper bound is 1. Second example is the sequence which is negative 1 to the power of n. When you take positive values it is n is a natural number, and when you take odd values in place of n, it will be -1, and even values, it will be 1. So it oscillates between -1 and 1. So the first few terms are, when we take 1, it's -1, 2, +1, 3, -1, 4, +1. So it oscillates between 1 and -1. So from this, the least upper bound, which is the upper bound, means it is the values greater than or equal to 1, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and blah blah. And from those numbers, 1 is the least upper bound. The greatest lower bound is -1. The lower bound means -1, -2, -3, -4, and blah blah. So from those numbers, we certainly knows it is greatest least value or least bound, which is -1. The third example is the sequence is 1 minus 1 over n, which means when we insert large values in place of n, the sequence will lead equals to 1, because 1 over n will be 0 for millions. When we take n, yes, 100,000 or millions, it will absolutely equals to 0. It is approaches to 0. So 1 minus 0 is equals to 1. And when we take 1, it will be 0. So the first few terms are, when you take 1, it will be 0. When you take 2, it will be equals to 1 over 2, and 2 over 3, 3 over 4, 4 over 5. From those, it increases to 1, because 1 minus 0 equals to 1. The least upper bound from this sequence is 1, and the greatest lower bound from this sequence is equals to 0. So this is all about least upper bound and least greatest bound. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.